All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Sunday, July 4th, 2021. So happy July 4th to everybody. And we are continuing to track Tropical Storm Elsa on this July 4th for potential impacts early next week to Florida and some of the rest of the southeast United States. This is going to be a quick update this morning. We'll probably roll another one in the evening. I got some plans in the middle of the day today, so we're going to go ahead and kick this and kind of hit the wave tops. This won't be as meteorologically in the weeds and all that. We're just going to hit the big need to know stuff and get you out of here. So, Tropical Storm Elsa, this is the 11 a.m. advisory from National Hurricane Center. Just a 3-day forecast for a little bit more zoomed in look at what's going on. The big news this morning is Tropical Storm watches now have been extended for southwest Florida. We had the Florida Keys have those watches yesterday. These have been upgraded to warnings from Cedar Key to the Dry Tortugas. And now we have tropical storm watches for the rest of the northern Florida Keys and southwest Florida up to about Bonita Beach, which is between Naples and Fort Myers. That doesn't include Fort Myers, but it is between those two cities. So you can see those tropical storm watches will continue to creep up that west coast of Florida. They'll probably go all the way to Appalachia Bay at least by the time this thing actually shows up. But Hurricane Center, just as the timing is necessary, will roll those up the coast. Hurricane Center's forecast cone this morning, no major changes. Track philosophy wise, we still expect this thing to come in somewhere around Tampa, north or south of the maximum sustained winds of the storm have dropped further. They are down to 60 miles an hour. Elsa had a really interesting night last night. If you're following the Facebook page, the storm got basically near Haiti. It got right off the coast of Haiti, and then it had this gigantic convective burst. I mean, it was one of the most impressive, like convective deep thunderstorm like towers I've seen in a long time. I mean, it was gravity waves and overshooting tops. It was like a glorious light show. The recon data was flying it, and the recon data was for the hurricane hunters, and they were like, well, "This thing's not even that strong at all. It's not doing well." And what happened is Elsa did what we call a center reformation, where a storm gets really, 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 really intense thunderstorms, and the low level center gets yanked back up under it. It sort of just it like kind of like forcibly reshuffles itself. Like think like a chiropractor cracking your back. It's like all one time, and it's like and that's what it did. It caused Elsa to jump in her track. It's not super noticeable. We're going to look on here. This is a University of Albany website, and it kind of tracks, how the storm is actually tracking versus how models and HD and whatnot see it. And you're going to see this bend in the track. It was coming up, and then it went whoop. And there's this subtle like shift down towards Jamaica, and it's a pretty big shift for a very small window of time. That's why the Hurricane Center's cone look something like this, and we say, well, the storm can track within that cone. This is because Elsa just randomly decided to jump dozens of miles to kind of the west in the grand scheme of things. At the center, jumped back to the east, and it caused a shift in the track kind of to the west. It's weird, but that's kind of how it sounds. So this morning, she's actually very, very close to Jamaica, and this has some track implications. But as we look at the satellite presentation this afternoon or late this morning, it looks really good on satellite. But hurricane hunters are again finding pretty weak winds of the storm. The central pressure this morning, if you're being gracious, is 1,009 millibars, which is way up from what it was a couple days ago in the Windward Islands, and is barely, I mean, that's barely low pressure. 1,012 is your standard atmosphere. Okay, so if background pressures around the storm are high, then 1,009 is still lower, relatively lower. But it's just not very impressive storm this morning, and it looks like it is still a little bit off center. You can see the latest recon pass found the center of circulation on the surface just offshore of like central western Jamaica. And if we look at the infrared loop, it looks like the mid-level center is probably here and the low-level center is probably here. So it still has this kind of east tilt to it. It's not as strong as it was. It's getting closer to being aligned. And aligning those centers is critical for the storm to actually develop into something. And if it doesn't have that, it's not going to develop. So the sort of the other news though is that Elsa will be moving south of the worst part of Cuba. This part of Cuba, the eastern part of Cuba, is very hilly and mountainous and could be really, really disruptive to Elsa. But this thing when she came up by Haiti and she went whoop like this, means she is going to track into some pretty warm water. There's a lot of warm water south of Cuba, and now you see the Hurricane Center's forecast path pretty assuredly is going to keep her off of the western or the eastern side of Cuba, and she's going to cross on this western side of Cuba where it is a lot lower elevation and it's a lot thinner. And she's also not spending this time here on land, instead she's spending this time on water, and that 10, 12 hours of going over land versus over water we talked about last night is a big deal. So the grand scheme of things, we do think Elsa is going to try to re-strengthen, but it's a relative term because the pressure is like 1,009 millibars, and the Hurricane Center has the winds at 60 miles an hour. I would be really shocked if this thing was actually making that. It's kind of how they do their advisories. They slow roll the changes, so they're probably being generous. Although I think there was some 55 knot winds, they were just well away from the center of the storm. So bottom line is that Elsa is weaker considerably today, but she may have done what she had to do to kind of get herself back in order, meaning that we're going to have to watch this thing carefully throughout the day today and into early tonight as she does make her approach to Cuba. She will weaken some as she does move over Cuba. It's still land. It's not going to be completely beneficial to her. And, she's going to have a solid, probably about 6 hours or so where she's crossing land, and it will disrupt the small vortex a decent bit. But and then you have this small period where she gets over the Florida Strait. So you got these two periods where she's gonna have some time over water. These little 6-8 hour bursts over water. I don't think it's enough time for her to do a whole lot at this point. I think a tropical storm coming into western Florida is pretty likely. I just don't really see that she has a lot of time to really get going. I mean, yeah, could she maybe get to 75 miles an hour and be a hurricane again? It's possible, but this is a small storm. It's not going to have time for eyeball replacements and to get bigger and all that. So I think you're looking for the bottom line today that yeah, she's got some time. She could surprise us. It's still possible, but I think you're going to see this kind of disorganized, pulsing, up and down sort of thing where she's going to kind of work her way through. She's going to kind of stay in this upper tropical storm range. It's still a small storm, and you're going to have a landfall somewhere in western Florida, and that's how it's probably going to look. And again, the timing shifted a little bit. We're talking about southwest Florida getting in on the action Tuesday night, and then the upper Florida getting into the action on Wednesday. So 8 a.m. Wednesday is where they show the official landfall, and if we go to the rest of the full forecast, it races up the coast and is out of here after that. So let's go ahead and look at some of your, again, flight track philosophy hasn't changed. It's the same thing we've been talking about. Computer models agreeing with that pretty well as well. They're all pretty well locked on that upper west coast of Florida and then a turn right up the east coast. Just as a note, tropical storm watches could be posted for coastal Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, especially if she kind of takes this turn where she's only over Florida for a little while, and then you've got this coastal rake where half the storm's over water. It can still produce some significant weather in the Carolinas, so don't sleep on this up there. Intensity models pretty much all holding steady at tropical storm. The ship's still buying a potential Category 1 hurricane. It's like I said, I wouldn't throw it off the table completely, but it would probably be like a 75 mile an hour hurricane. It wouldn't really be like a 100 mile an hour, well developed, big wind field and all that stuff. So surge is going to be an issue for the west coast of Florida. Even if she's a tropical storm, it'll probably be in the range of 3 to 5 feet, I would imagine. It's going to still be significant in some areas in these bays and shallow water. It's a bad news scenario. I don't think this. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, the surge graphics aren't really up yet, but for up there. But yeah, you'll see these come up a little bit as we move up the coast. And rainfall totals, not super impressive with Elsa. And I said these would come up, but now that she's weaker, I think the WPC for now has got a pretty good guess right here. Generally 2 to 4 inches for most of the state. The western, southwest coast could probably see, 4 to 6. And then if we say 2 to 4, you always have to think that you could get up to 8. That's kind of how you should think about rainfall totals. If you hear the broad brush of 2 to 4, okay, then I'm getting 8. Maybe even like 3 to 6. But and a broad brush, so 8 to 10 possible. But overall, a soaking for the west or for the state of Florida, especially for the peninsula. Not so much for the Panhandle, but they'll still have some rain from the stalled frontal boundary. So it's going to be a rainy couple days for sure, and this will lead to some flash flooding risk. WPC with a slight risk, a Category 2 essentially risk, or Stage 2 risk from them for flash flooding because the state has had a lot of rain since the middle of June. So water tables are high, lakes are full, creeks are full. You're going to see a lot of creek flooding. Places that typically flood are definitely going to flood as also comes through, and then you'll probably see some road flooding, things like that are unusual for this time of year. And winds are hard to peg, because we don't know her exact intensity, but I think you'll see the strong tropical storm force wind gusts mostly confined to the west coast of Florida, and especially where she comes ashore. You could probably see some 50, 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts wherever the center, exactly tracks, like just to the right of wherever the center tracks. But east coast of Florida, unless there's some really good last-minute intensity changes, we're probably talking about a very minimal tropical storm. We're probably just getting some tropical storm force gusts at 35, 40 miles an hour, especially here in northeast Florida. The center will be coming pretty close to over us, so some 30s and 40s wouldn't blow my mind, but I also wouldn't be expecting anything too significant. So, anyway, guys, what I got for you today. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.